Hey guys, what is up? My name is Megan. Welcome back to my channel, or welcome if you're new. I hope you guys are doing well and staying safe, and welcome to today's video, which is one I have been highly anticipating filming, and that is my spoiler-filled review for Skandar and the Phantom Rider by A.F Steadman, which is book 2 in the Skandar series. If you are new here, you may not know this, but I am absolutely obsessed with the Skandar series, which is a middle grade series following a main character called Skandar, who becomes a unicorn rider. If you want more information on the series itself, I have a non-spoiler review of the first book up on my channel, which kind of explains what the first book is about and what the remainder of the series is going on to be. Now, I will say on my channel I have been hosting discussions as well for Skandar books. The live show for the first book will be also linked in the description. I am a little bit late with posting a review for book 2, but I did actually read it twice in order to make sure that I had all the information for you guys for this video. So, as I said, this video will be spoiler filled, so if you don't want to be spoiled for Skandar, maybe come back once you've actually read the book. Without further ado, let's hop on into my thoughts. First off, obviously, we need to start with my star rating for Skandar. I am giving this like all the stars. This is a 5-star book for me, and I will say I have enjoyed Skandar 2 a million times more than Skandar 1, which I didn't think was possible, but there's just so many more elements in here that are obvious to like a second book in a series, so I can't fault Skandar 1, but that I just did not expect to be in here, and I was so happy that they were, and for that my enjoyment is like a 10 out of 10, 5 stars. I'm so happy that this is the way the series is going. So let's discuss thoughts. First thing I think was really interesting that was put in Skandar 2 that we didn't have in Skandar 1 was actually Kenna's perspective. So having that perspective from Skandar's sister, though it was very far in between in the book, made such an impact because there was this feeling of impending doom from I think the first few chapters. I think the first chapter is Kenna, and you're kind of like taken aback because sure, we hear a lot about Skandar's sister in book 1, but the end of book 1 has it be very ominous. You're kind of like questioning yourself as to what Kenna is going to be up to in the next book, and then bam, getting her perspective straight off the bat in book 2 I thought was absolute genius. And I do think that one of the elements I really enjoyed in Skandar 2 was the element of suspense that we did feel in book 1, but like the stakes are a million times higher in this one, and I could really appreciate that. I also think it's interesting with the perspective of Kenna because we get this very morally gray character that I, as a reader, wanted to root for. But in the end, there are so many context clues that Kenna is going to be the evil character in the series, and that it's going to be kind of like Skandar with his found family versus Kenna and like Skandar's mom, and I think that is going to be such a heartbreaking thing to have to choose between your blood family and your found family. But I think that the way this is woven throughout the book is such an interesting thing, and no pun intended with the Weaver. Sorry. So that is one element that I really enjoyed in the overall writing of the plot. I will say I also really enjoyed the pacing of this book because I think it was very well done between the balance of action and action-paced scenes and kind of like this quest to save the island from its destruction. And the other thing I thought was really well balanced was time with friends and bonding with their unicorns, and just like the creation of that relationship when you're a second year deep with those people who you share your life with every day. And I'm really grateful that the author did not skip through that, because I do think that it's one of the best parts of Skandar is the friendship and how it's much more complex, and from the start there are much more conflicts with Skandar and his friends and their values, and it's much more realistic than a lot of the other middle grade series I have personally read. One thing with the friendships that I wanted to touch on is exactly the clashes in the friendships, and I think ultimately it made their bond stronger. But for example, we have Bobby, who for a big part of this book wants nothing to do with Skandar and their friends because Skandar is always perceived as this hero, as the person who will save the day, and yeah, it's a big part of being friends with someone like Skandar, who was kind of like the chosen one trope, and I don't think we see that in a lot of middle grade books, how much of a conflict it would create in real life, because if the same person was seen taking credit, or the same person was always kind of like saving the day, even the really big things that the other kids can come up with and do are kind of always put aside for Skandar, and Bobby is the prime example of that, because Bobby is good at what she does. Bobby is, I mean, she won the training here, and in this book she ends up like losing to Amber, but still being second in the entire cohort. And I think that Bobby doesn't get the credit she deserves, and it was rightful of her to kind of express her anger towards the situation. And obviously, by the resolution of this, we get to understand that Bobby isn't necessarily mad at Skandar, but she's mostly mad at the context and the way that people decide to behave and who the attention goes towards, even though it's not always where it should be. I mean, Skandar does a lot of things in these books that are bad choices. The outcomes end up being really, really great, but the choices he does are terrible, and Bobby is obviously angry at that, and I thought that was such an interesting dynamic to add to the plot. Though I will say I'm happy that Bobby ultimately ends up joining the quartet again, and I think the way it was done showcased Bobby's ability and showed that she did indeed have so much to bring to this friend group, and that this friend group doesn't operate the same way without her, and she is such an important part of this quartet. And I believe this book does it so well with each member, because if we are to look at the ending where we get to where Skandar needs to find the first writer and the queen unicorn, we can see, and the message is very clear on page, that Skandar is absolutely nothing without the power of his friends. And I think that their intelligence and their capabilities were really brought to light, and I think that the author really did a service to children everywhere, in the sense that you might not be the chosen one, but everybody has to contribute some way. And I do think that all of their like book smarts, like Mitchell's book smarts, were really showcased in here, and Flo's bravery was also showcased, and their wit and their capabilities and their wanting to be there and their core value of friendship really shown throughout the book, but especially in the lead up to the end of this, like the climax of the book, I think was so well done. Now, I will also mention that I do think the characters stay very true to themselves, because, for example, at the beginning of this book we get Flo is kind of like the goody two-shoes of this group. Mitchell is also, but Flo has put so much responsibility up on herself because she is a silver, and the way that Flo acts in the beginning makes so much sense to me, because she needs to do like what is expected of her, and then once her values have truly been crossed, then she becomes not someone else per se, but she like sticks to her guns, she sticks to her roots and does what is right. And I think it was interesting because that meant breaking some rules, and again, we have a lot of rule breakers here, but I do think that the way this book writes that and writes the character, you just want to root for them, because it's not bad. Flo takes actions just like Skandar to do what she thinks is morally right, and I found it beautiful that the way that each of these characters got their moment to show their true selves. I think Flo was really when she saved the wild unicorns, and then when she infiltrated Skandar into the Silver Circle. For Mitchell, it was really standing up to his dad and being like, I don't want to be Commodore, I don't want to do this, Skandar is my friend, and if you're unhappy, well, too bad, so sad, I'm gonna make my own choices. And I thought that was very much remarkable, and that was standing up for himself, and Bobby did the same with not being friends with them for a while. And so I think that it was beautiful to see, and the character development, all in all, was one of my favorite parts of this story. It was also interesting to see Kenya in that aspect, because she also has, at least in my opinion, symptoms of a spiraling mental health, where she was so sad and depressed that she would do anything without really taking anything into consideration to accomplish her goal, and she has really put her happiness on getting a unicorn, and I feel like she's the kind of person who, no matter what what happens in her life, no matter if she did have things to be grateful for, she just would not stop spiraling until she gets that unicorn. And you see kind of the aftermath of that even when she gets her unicorn, and I thought that entire thing was so disturbing, but it's so well done, and it is also a representation of mental health. And yeah, I'm not going to get too much more into detail about all the mental health, but I do think it is very well done in this book, and that I am grateful we do get that. So for the plot itself, I do think I would be here all day if I talked about like every single element of this plot. So I did jot down a few things that I wanted to discuss that I think were more like highlights or bigger parts of this book. One thing I think is the travel and arrival of Kenna to the island. I think that the whole thing with Dorian is really, really sketchy. Like, it's really easy to hate him as a character, and it kind of left me wondering the entire book, like, how was Kenna's dad, like, and I know it's because he's such in a depressive state and he just wants kind of like his children to live out their dream, but like he just kind of like let her go without question, and that was like shocking to me, but obviously it made sense for the plot. But I will say it was a very well done, like really sprinkled out throughout the book, and at the end when Skandar's like, I know my sister isn't on the island, and you're like, actually, let me tell you a little something. So I liked how we were in the know as a reader, but Skandar wasn't, and just like Kenna asking her dad for like to keep writing to Skandar because she couldn't, but then like her like traveling all this time and Skandar not being in the know, it felt compelling but also evil, because like she always says how much she loves her brother, and she's always like, my brother has been lying to me, but she is literally doing the same thing, and I don't think she sees it. And it's one of my biggest like, I'm afraid I'm going to cry things, that entire plot line, because for now Kenna is like, to the Eyrie I go, even though she's going to be under constant supervision, but that scares me, because like Skandar is always on such thin ice, and like yes, he does things every time in the books to kind of like make it up, quote unquote, but I'm scared of how bad she's going to ruin things. And I think that at first I was like, maybe I misunderstood, and like she's gonna go with them, become a student, and it's gonna be like them taking on the world. But then the last few lines where Kenna's mom is like, Kenna's exactly where she needs to be, and I'm like, this is a whole plan that's gonna wreck our hearts, isn't it? And I really do think that's what's gonna happen. And I've had some people tell me on Instagram that Annabelle herself said that like, you're probably gonna cry, and I did not want to cry, and I know I will, whether that be in book 3 or book 4. I know the tears are coming, because it's the ultimate choice, and you can see that Kenna in her head is also in that space of ultimate choice between, I lose my dream of being a unicorn rider or being bonded to a unicorn, if I choose to just like go with my brother and be nice and behave. So it's like she's battling her own inner demons, and Skandar is going to have to make the ultimate choice of his friends and the Eyrie or his sister. And I don't think there's a more heartbreaking choice, but I just know with her chapters and the evil and the Silver Circle that there will not be another choice. Speaking of the Silver Circle, I thought that that entire plot line was so intriguing, and I do think I should be wary of Rex as well. So with the Silver Circle, I thought it was interesting, one, to see Flo and how she is struggling to incorporate the Silver Circle, because her unicorn was so happy there, and obviously because of their bond, she wanted to like make him happy, and he feels like he belongs there. But in her heart, she doesn't feel like she does belong, though she's battling that thing of like, we are Silvers for a reason, I need to join my community, but also my community is against one of the people I loved the most. And so it's kind of like the battle of values again that is at its core. But I think that like the plot line of them actually killing the wild unicorns because they're scared that Skandar is gonna, mend them with their writers, and just that whole thing was terrifying, and I felt physically ill reading that passage where everyone is in that arena, and it's just like the unicorns killing the wild unicorns, and like if Flo had not stepped in, what would have happened. And so it was interesting to see that it's at that moment that her loyalties kind of shifted. But that plot point was disgusting, and I can't even imagine reading that as a 10-year-old or a 12-year-old. I would have lost my freaking marbles. So I do think that Skandar does get a little bit dark. I appreciate it, and I do think that this is the kind of book that you read even if you're not a middle grade reader, because there's just so much to it. But I was really shocked by all of that, and I think that the interesting thing with the Silvers as well is the friendship between Flo and Rex, and the ending where Darian basically gets himself yeeted and Rex takes over not only as the Silver Circle's like head person, but also as the air professor, like instructor. And that twist, I was like, did I understand this correctly? I was shooketh to my core, and I also feel that this is gonna play play into book 3, because book 3 is air, and when I put 2 and 2 together, I was like, what are you cooking, A.F Steadman? So I do think that's another particular point in the plot. And just the sightings of the wild unicorns, that dapple gray unicorn has my heart. And I was so devastated when that unicorn found Kenna. And Kenna was like, peace, bestie. I'm not going to bond with you. And I was like, huh? And now I fear that Kenna is going to do the same thing as her mom and kind of like have that double bond. I know her mom had a bond to like a regular unicorn and a wild unicorn, and then Kenna kind of has this wild foul unicorn. But is Dapple Gray gone forever? Why did we spend so much time with Dapple Gray if Dapple Gray is not? You know what I mean? So that's one thing I'm like iffy about, and obviously I do think that all of that is going to continue to play on in book 3, at least I hope so. Another huge thing, which I feel like I haven't even talked about, and I'm sorry this review is so long, it's more like a book chat. The possessions. All of the possessions, and people almost dying, and people being so injured because of the possessions, because the island is essentially breaking apart. And I think that entire kind of plot that carry out throughout the book to the ultimate end was so fantastic, because the disruption and the carelessness of the wild unicorns was bound to have an impact one way or the other, and I found that that was so interesting because the unicorns belong to the island, are such part of the island, and I thought it was cool that the island kind of got revenge for those killings. And like the way all of the different elements were showcased. Like sometimes I feel in books we like have a first book where all the elements are showcased and whatever, and they don't really appear in the remainder of the series, but like the elements were really well showcased in this because of all the damage they did. We saw water, we saw air, we saw earth, like everything was crumbling and shattering to pieces, and it showed us how strong the elements are and how important it is to respect nature, because nature will come back and bite you. And I think that was a moral of like, you need to take care of the earth, and 2, a demonstration of powers, because all of these people are bonded to these elements, and it's so intriguing to see what exactly these elements can do. And I thought, what a better way than to show them the island disruption. That did carry out throughout the plot, but it was also like the element of the elements, and I thought that was really, really cool. And that leads me to say I loved the end of this book because it kind of had 2 resolutions. One being Skandar and his journey to find the first writer and the Queen of Unicorns, and then that entire thing in the tunnel, as I mentioned before, with every friend needing to use their skill and their element in order for Skandar to arrive, and the moral of it being you can't do this alone, and you would not be a good spirit wielder if you didn't have friends, and how it took all of the friends to put that bone staff or whatever it's called into the ground and make the change and kind of reverse the damages. And also the fact that during this, Skandar has to like understand and be told this is not the only time this mistake is going to happen. It's going to happen again, and whether that be in 50 years, 100 years, 100,000 years, the island is going to want to destruct itself again because people are greedy and stuff like this happens. And so Skandar was like, I promise it's never going to happen again. And they're like, my sweet child of innocence, it will. And I thought that was a great discussion on people, mankind. And I really loved that part because it was so high stakes. And then we're like, yay, we did it. And then boom, Kenna. It was like a double whammy, you know? And I really appreciated how the ending wasn't like all at once. You could feel that the ending was coming throughout the last 70 pages of this book, and I thought that was genius. Sometimes we get rushed endings, and I don't think that was it. And I think while we were ending, we were also setting up for book 3. I'll name a few little bits and pieces left that I didn't touch on that I thought were really cool. One, Nina won the cup again, and I was so scared of that outcome because it was kind of said here and there, like, if I don't win the cup, someone else will have to take the decisions. And for now, Nina seems to be allied with Skandar in the sense, like, she didn't kick him out. He's not out of the Eyrie. He's still under the protection of his instructors. And so we could have had an outcome where she did not win the cup and shit hit the fan. And I do think this will happen in book 3 because she's like, I'm gonna need to win again next year. And I'm like, the book is called Skandar and the Chaos Cup. Nina referred to the fact that she needs to win the Chaos Cup again. I think something's brewing where someone else will be in charge, and that's gonna go badly for Skandar. But I did think it was cool to see the Chaos Cup and have that nervousness inside of me. I was like, oh my god, is she gonna win? I was actually frightened, and I love that. And I will end, and again, I probably forget some things, like I have notes and notes on this book, but these are the things that are like coming to me most. The burial of the wild unicorns that were killed made me shed a tiny tear because the respect that was given to them at the end and knowing it was the right thing to do to kind of end their life peacefully really made me want to weep like a child. So I was very satisfied with the way that they were given closure. I don't know for how long, but they're buried in the ground. And for now, that's all that matters. I will say also, when I read the scene of the cover in the book, I was like, hold on, this is jogging a memory, and boom, it's the actual cover. So that is kind of what I have to say. I mean, I could talk about this book for hours, so if you have any questions, comments, concerns, you can address them in the comments. I'd love to chat. If not, you can, as always, DM me on my Bookstagram, and I answer, and I love talking books there with you guys. I hope you guys enjoyed this book as much as I did. If you have some thoughts or differing opinions, I would love to hear them, and I can't wait to be back here to chat about book 3 with you very, very soon. Bye guys, happy reading.